Good morning, everybody. I'm very excited today to talk to Tim Master, who is the brand ambassador for Chartreuse. I've liked Chartreuse for a long time, and Tim's going to tell us why we like it so much. And he's a lovely person. In the meantime, tomorrow I'm going to be talking to Manuel Mufato in Mendoza. On Monday the 22nd, Christian Rodolfi of Santi in Italy. They make one of my favorite Amaronis. And on Monday the 29th, Valentina Abona in Barolo, who makes fab wines over there. Hey, Virginie. Let's see, Tim should be here any minute. Virginie, I want to talk to you about seaweed. I put a post up about seaweed and Alsace, and I'm going to talk about that some more on an upcoming podcast with a friend, so we should talk. Another gray day. I hope my light's okay. It's kind of gloomy outside. There's Tim, and here we go. I hear you. Hey, Oscar. Hi, Robin. There we are. How are you, sir?
That was quick. I'm learning how to do this. Hi.
It's the new whatever. I don't know. New. There's a movie called, I think it's like The Man on the Moon with Sam Rockport, and he lives on the moon for an indefinite period of time, taking care of like the mines, and this is how he communicates with his friends and family. And
it's amazing, and no one sees if he has a bald spot or if how tall he is.
Right. Exactly. So Some people like wait until a bunch of people are on here, but I think people are going to come and go, and so let's just jump in.
Yeah.
Tim, would you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, and I always like to hear how you got where you are, especially in a time of flux right now. It's good to hear, and you have a very cool job, and I think it's kind of inspiring to hear how you got there.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, thank you for having me on this. This is really cool. I miss seeing you in person. I work for the importer of Chartreuse liqueur and a few other spirits. And a lot of wines, as you know, because you have several at the Waverly Inn. We're the importer of Chartreuse in the U.S. I manage and I'm the brand director for those brands for the spirit portfolio at Wildman. And it's been an interesting journey. I mean, I started like so many people in our industry in the restaurant world. So I was about 20 years in the restaurants, and mainly in Philadelphia, fine dining, cocktail bars in the 90s. So I put a lot of fruit juice together with Absolute Citron, and that was a great cocktail.
Lychee martinis were very inventive back then.
Everything with a teeny end. I think my email's address was timteeny@Comcast, or whatever, or something like that. It was fantastic. But yeah, so I was 20 years in the restaurant business, and like a lot of people in our business, particularly now, I started to contemplate what was next. I wanted to own a restaurant. That was my dream. But in the mid-30s, I was offered a brand ambassador position with Plymouth Gin, actually. A fellow named Simon Ford walked into my bar and was like, hey, you want to do this? I didn't know what a brand ambassador was. And this is, I was 36, looking at restaurants, waking up at 1 in the afternoon, that kind of thing. And I jumped into it, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I progressed. That was with Pernod Ricard at the time. I took a job with Pernod, moving myself from Philadelphia to New York to take a role that I learned a lot and did enjoy.
Those usually go hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. But it was cool because I learned I always say I learned what Excel was.
Yeah.
And you learn what you don't like. And then from Pernod, I started with Wildman, and that was back about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. When Chartreuse was started, smaller than it is now. And I came in as a brand ambassador / brand manager, but it was a lot more brand ambassador work with that. And as we'll talk, and for people who know Chartreuse, there's a lot of story to talk about with Chartreuse. Yeah. There's mystery, which is kind of fun. So it's very important to be a brand ambassador for this brand because education is key to brand ambassador role. But
Yeah.
as Chartreuse grew, my role grew. Working with a smaller company like Wildman allows you to kind of mold your job. And that was really cool. So as you know, in the past years, I still hang on to the brand ambassador educational aspect, but I've grown into more, into more brand management. So and now here we are, I've got 2 amazing brand ambassadors who work, under me in various parts of the country, possibly to do more. And I manage that process, but I still get to do these things and talk about the brand, which I love so much.
Totally.
So that's my trajectory.
Can you explain just a little bit for maybe the layperson? Because I used to buy Chartreuse from Southern and now from Wildman, but how all that works and and we'll just briefly, no review, because you always imported it, right?
Correct. So, you have a 3-tiered system, as we all know, in the country. You have the supplier, you've got the distributor, which is in your example, Southern, and then you've got Waverly Inn, the retailer, and then the consumer. It is cool how that 3-tier system came about right after Prohibition to make sure that there was no Al Capone's, trying to rob you. But that I don't want to go that far off topic. So we are the importer of Chartreuse and a lot of other wines. We have our own distributor network, though, in New York and New Jersey.
Gotcha.
So we have a sales force. So we literally, us importer brings it in, sells it to our own.
Gotcha.
Right. And we said, why don't we keep Chartreuse in New York where it used to be with Southern? It just makes sense to keep it in-house. Our people, especially when it comes to this particular brand, which it's such a story, and you really need to.
It's really a special product. So on that note, would you explain what Chartreuse is? Take as long as you want.
Do we have 400 years?
Exactly.
Well, Chartreuse is a liqueur. Chartreuse means 3 things, actually. So I'm assuming people on here, hi everyone, people on here who look at this will have an idea of what the Chartreuse liqueur is, unless you came on here because you like the color. And that's kind of cool too. So the color actually came from the liqueur back in the 60s. Wasn't the other way around. But Chartreuse means 3 things. It's the liqueur, but it's the mountain region where the liqueur is made in the French Alps.
What is that mountain range in French and English?
Chartreuse? The Chartreuse Mountains?
Chartreuse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Chartreuse Mountains. It's on the tip of the French Alps. So right near a town, Grenoble, or an hour south of Lyon. Okay. So it bumps up into Burgundy.
Okay.
For us wine lovers out here, and I know there are some here. That's the one thing is the liqueur, the mountain region, and then the name of the monks order, the Carthusian monks or the Chartreuse monks. Okay. And they're the owners of this brand, Chartreuse. They own it. They've owned it. They've received this recipe of long life 400 or some years ago. They've been making this for about 400 years. It took about 130 years, though, for them to decipher the recipe. Now, back then, there's this recipe was meant for like the elixir of long life, medicine. It's made with even today, it's made with 130 herbs and spices and flowers. So back then, that cures everything. And when they received the recipe in Paris, if you've been to Paris, I'm sure you have. You went to the Luxembourg Gardens in Saint Germain. So that's where the monastery in Paris was, and that's where the recipe was received.
Oh, cool.
After 130 years of R&D, they came up with this little bottle here. So this is the original recipe, the elixir of long life. Mm-hmm. In here is, it's a little bottle. There's a bottle here. So if you can see this is not available in the U.S. This is like 100 and, it's 69% ABV, and it's used is a tincture. So that was what the monks made for a long time. Fast forward to the mid 1800s, 1840, they said people were not only enjoying this for medicine, but started to drink it. So let's make something a little bit more palatable. more quaffable. That's not 100, 69% ABV.
Right.
And they came out with both green Chartreuse, which is what we have now today, that anyone who knows the liqueur, that's what you'll see, the green Chartreuse, and yellow Chartreuse.
Mm-hmm.
And both green and yellow Chartreuse is a liqueur made with, like I said, 130 herbs, spices, and flowers. The green is...
And that was when?
So in 1838 to 1840, and I could go on forever. We used to think, up until last year or 2 years ago, that the green came out a lot earlier and then the yellow came out. But recently, a new book was written by the people over in France, everybody who's been involved with Chartreuse forever. And after they went through documents and the monks opened the archives in the monastery, which is located in the French Alps, they found that it really came out around the same time.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's cool. So the green, and then we'll finish. We'll go back to but with Chartreuse, we have 4 main types: the green and the yellow. The green is 110 proof, more vegetal driven, all natural. The green color, I think, don't quote me because I don't know, comes from the chlorophyll of spinach.
I'm just going to interrupt you again. 110 proof means 55% alcohol, so it went from 68 to 55, which is still strong, but that's when it becomes palatable.
It's strong. It's strong in any definition. I mean, if you look at like barrel proof whiskeys, it can knock you on your tushy.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it also, because of the sugar, because of the composition of the of all of the herbs, and the fact that they age it a little bit in barrels for about 3, 5, 6 years. We don't, when it's ready. It allows those flavors to blend, and it subdues that alcohol. So I've always learned that higher alcohol pushes out flavors.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I'm just surprised it was so high. I don't just drinking it wasn't aware of that. I should have known. But anyways, continue. But that's why it's so good. You don't think it's so strong.
It is. I mean, if you haven't, I'm sure when you're tableside and someone's like, "What's Chartreuse?" and you taste someone on it, not everyone's gonna love it, but the people who like it love it.
Yeah.
And then it has a sister, or a brother, or a friend, or a partner, Chartreuse Yellow. So the yellow is a more spice-driven version, lower proof, 86 proof, or 43% ABV.
Okay.
And this one, the yellow, has the addition of what we believe is distilled honey to give it a sweeter flavor. So the baking spices. And then both of those have I want to put the Cadillac version, where they have the Chartreuse VEP, which is extra long aging, Vieillissement Exceptionnel Prolongé, very long aging. I think it's a made up word, to be honest. And those bottles, are more expensive, but are limited amounts. And they sit in the barrel for an extra 10, 15 years until they're ready. And that's really cool, because that just allows the flavors, that alcohol even mellows even more. The sugar, the sugar kind of blends with the herbs, and it really it's a really wonderful mouthful.
Yeah, it's exceptional. And you were just saying going tableside. The way I do it is either the big one you gave me that magical 3-liter bottle, and if you walk around with that, everybody wants to try it. But I often just go to if I can get to the table after dinner, and I will walk up with 4 wine glasses with an ice cube in it and just say, who wants to taste? And one guy will be like, wow, and then all of them have it, and it's just done.
Oh yeah, all 4 dig it?
I mean, yeah, they're all. If one person has it, nobody wants to be left out.
Well,
but,
fair enough. It's a showstopper.
Anyway,
you have
exactly.
the big 3-liter beautiful bottle. That's pretty cool.
It's insane. Yeah. I need to march around with that a little bit more. It's a good reminder. So can you talk about the evolution of the consumer's awareness, is how I'm going to say that, because it's drunk differently now than it was maybe 10 years ago. And this is just even over the 10 years you've been doing this. It's a bartender's darling now, and but it's been around forever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the consumption, how people drink it, it varies. And what I love about this liqueur, I mean, I've fallen in love with working for it. It's not just the job, but it's just my life now.
It's magical
really
stuff.
good.
Yeah.
Which kind of bothers my wife when we go out to dinner, because all I do is talk about Chartreuse, and she's like, she's actually sitting right there, so just side-eyed me.
You can throw cotton balls at you or ping pong balls if you want.
She throws little bottles of Chartreuse at me. Anyway. But the evolution, so what is really cool about Chartreuse is the versatility. Now, like, to your question, what has been the trajectory, or what has been the timeline of Chartreuse, like how it's been used, right? You know, traditionally it's used, like I said, medicinally in a little bottle, but then it started to become, you know, it was drank straight or on the rocks after dinner, traditionally in France. That's the traditional serve. It's recommended to kind of, you know, people like it drink as a white wine temperature. It's a digestive, so most digestives are served after dinner. So that's one of the main reasons why it was served after dinner. You know, settles your stomach, and with 130 herbs, does that. Then it started to make its way into cocktails, and I don't want to go too far back, but yeah, pre-prohibition. You know, the Last Word cocktail, the Alaska, the Bijou, all of these drinks had Chartreuse in it in the early 1900s and onward. After Prohibition ended, these drinks, like many cocktails, kind of disappeared for a while. And it wasn't until about the early 2000s when the cocktails, you know, Renaissance started to come back. You know, bartenders were starting to use it, and one bartender, and I love calling him out, is Mary Stenson out of Seattle, from the Zigzag Cafe, found this recipe, The Last Word. So if you know, the Last Word is gin, maraschino, green chartreuse, and lime. He started making that drink, and it is a beautiful drink. It's probably the most well-known drink to Chartreuse, but bartenders would watch what Mary was doing and reading blogs, and there's a guy named Jamie Boudreau out there and a lot of other bartenders, and they all started learning, like, what are people doing? And it's in the bartenders, you know, DNA to riff on recipes. So people would start to use Chartreuse, you know, in many different fashions. I think it's like, I was with a guy named Joaquin Simo recently, and he said he used the line, it's like a cheat sheet for bartenders, because it's a cheat code for bartenders, because you can, with all the flavors in Chartreuse, it could pair with many different flavors you want to work with. So if you wanted to make a Manhattan and you wanted to add Chartreuse, the baking spices or the in Chartreuse will enhance that Manhattan. But if you want to make a margarita and you want to add some Chartreuse, then what's going to come out is probably those grassy or vegetal notes. You know, and that's
fascinating.
Yeah, so it became a cocktail thing for a while, and that's the point of entry. And then sommeliers have always, in my opinion, I mean, you can talk for the sommelier world, but the wine lovers have always liked Chartreuse for a whole different reason. You know, Chartreuse has the terroir of it, the different herbs, and it varies from bottle to bottle. Depends on what's happening. Is if there's rosemary in it, was it wet when we picked the rosemary? Was it hot? I don't know. And so that's a really cool part of Chartreuse. And that's really important to us, because it really allows you to taste Chartreuse when you drink it straight or neat. Yeah. And then the final way, I mean, again, it's part of the straight consumption, is there's a whole other facet to it, is it ages in the bottle. And it's continuously ages, one of the few liqueurs that do. And I find that to be very fascinating. Some say it ages for the better. I think it's amazing. I've tasted bottles from the 50s and the 40s, and it's just all different flavors. And then now there's a whole world of collectors who are selling bottles and buying bottles $400 or $500 more, thousands.
Yeah.
So,
and the collectors are buying stuff that just has been sitting in the bottle, aging in the bottle, or is it the weird, unusual tarragon bottles? What's a collectible Chartreuse?
Last year. No, I mean, honestly, I think I mean, again, I stopped diving into the science of why when I would ask, what's in Chartreuse? I would ask this all the time, you know, because we all want to know. We all want to know what's in it. You know, how long is it aged? What type of wood are we using? And I would be given the emoji answer of, huh? I don't know.
Right. Yep.
So at some point I just said it does. So the bottle starts to age. I've started to taste differences even after a year or two. Yeah. I tend to see an awkward period of about 5 or 6 years where the alcohol might jump up. This is just my own opinion. I know I'm seeing some of the names on here who work with, you know, who may have it different, but, you know, it's kind of a growing up period. Still very cool, but the flavors start to change. And then after like 10, 15 years, you really start to see a whole different flavor. So I love what I do at home, and I recommend is I just make verticals. So I'll take a bottle of 2018, put it away, 2017, and then I get to taste it.
That's a very smart way of doing it. M. Johnson Boston, who I'm assuming you know, says, and I think you told me this a long time ago, nothing better than finding an old bottle in a liquor store in the middle of nowhere, because that's how you find that. But how do you, there is a way, and I know you can Google it, but there's a way of finding out if there's a code on the bottle that tells, is that a secret, or you just let?
No, I'll tell you right now. I was hoping that would come up, but I love this little secret. Thanks, Matt Johnson, for the cue. I think it's Matt, right? Just kidding. Yes, there are bottles, and there's a couple ways to go and get old bottles. Estate sales, you can wait for your neighbor to pass away. It's morbid, but I found some good ones that way. There's the Sotheby's and the other collectors. But yeah, like as Matt mentioned, you could just go to a liquor store, and if you see dusty bottle, you can pick it up and hold on. So right on this bottle here, you're not going to see it, but trust me that there's numbers.
Yep.
And you have my calculator on my phone.
Yeah.
There's 6 numbers on there, so everyone get your pen up. 1084 is the year the monks were ordained, 1084 AD. If you take that as the constant, 1084, and the first 3 numbers on that cap, L, which is lot number, so I can say it's like 936. And do this math, someone correct me, but 1084 plus 936 is probably 2020, 2021. So you add those first 3 numbers on the bottle cap to 1084, and you've got the year. And I've seen people find bottles from older, you know, a lot in the 2005-6 range, and it's usually in places, you know, that are more rural than urban areas.
Yeah.
I'm just recently moved to Asbury Park, New Jersey, so I'm bottle dusting the hell out of these stores, you know.
The estate sale is a really cool idea. I never thought about that, because I have a friend who goes to Wisconsin and goes to estate sales. If you say I go home and I look in my parents' liquor cabinet and there's a bottle of Chartreuse that I know is 10 years old and it's open, does that matter?
No, again, another reason, it's interesting, it doesn't oxidize and turn like you would think a wine would, well, like a wine would. It's very surprising that it doesn't. And I have even seen some old bottles that have turned, you know, discolor. Because like if you look at the yellow, you know, it's all natural. There's no additive to this. So if air is hitting this, it still is a stable product to taste. I've seen it, this is a new bottle, but I've seen it where it's more brown. And I've drank it that way.
Yeah.
I've not heard any reason why it was bad, and it tasted
That's
delicious.
amazing.
What's the difference between yellow? Oh, question here. What's the difference between yellow and green VEP? Oh man, yellow. What's he saying? VEP, and I go with yellow. Does the proof change? So I can answer that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So green and yellow, like I mentioned, are different proof and different blend of the herbs. Same thing with the VEP. It's basically they pull some green and yellow aside and put it in a much smaller barrel to let it age longer. And the proof on yellow goes down by 1 to 86 to 84 in the yellow VEP. And the green Chartreuse goes down from 110 to 108.
Okay.
My guess is that it's the alcohol, it's the angel share going.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
And at Ferron, we did talk about this earlier. We explained a little bit, but they're not. You don't take green and make yellow out of it. They're just two separate, completely different recipes, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Correct. So it's great. So the monks who make Chartreuse are 100% responsible for the blending of the herbs, which takes place in the monastery. Behind closed doors, that's not what you see. And they will make different blends. This is your green bag blend. This is your yellow bag blend.
Right.
There's various different blends. The magic of Chartreuse, and what we don't know, but what I've kind of depicted over the years of looking in, hey, there's the door at the monastery. It opened. Can I see? There's a bunch of different bags with a bunch of different blends. And the green Chartreuse takes almost a month just to macerate, and you know it before it even goes into the barrels. It's a long process, and that's where that magic happens. So the monks do the blending. Then they do get help from the laymen of the town. They send it down to the distillery, and that's where the laymen or the distillers will help the monks. And you know, it doesn't take much. You pour it into a vat of grape distillate. Yeah.
Cian has a question here about the MOF, and I just want to pause for a minute. That I hope you can go longer than a half an hour because there's too many questions that I have. If for some reason it cuts us off, I'm gonna save this and start a new one. So just give me a second and come back if we.
I love that. We can totally. There's a whole other world we can talk about.
Okay, good. Hey, Laura, out in San Francisco. So can you explain what MOF is? It's Meilleur Ouvrier Français, like the best worker of France is what that means. Can you explain what the MOF bottles are?
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Diane. Yeah, there are other bottling and cuvées that the monks make that are not available in the U.S. Fingers crossed one day, but right now there are not. There's the MOF, which is the more well-known one. There's the 1604. Let's go to the MOF to the question. The MOF is, you know this better, is a society of sommeliers.
Each year they have a contest in France, like the best workers, and it's in many fields.
Many fields.
A lot of people learned about it because Pascal Lepelletier won it for sommellerie last year, 2 years ago. So it's like a thing. The best workers in France, chefs get it too, I believe. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And God bless. I'm so happy with Pascaline. She's the first female of this group, correct? Which is amazing.
So deserving too.
10, 15 years ago, the MOF sommelier wanted their own bottling. Monks, can you please make our own bottling? Can we do it? No. Nothing happens quickly. Finally, because of their friendship, the monks and the sommeliers of France, particularly, Olivier Pousset was involved in that, if I got his name correctly. They worked together. Instead of saying you can have your own blend, they said, let's work together on making I don't want to say a souped up yellow, but a yellow Chartreuse with a little bit varied flavors that appealed to the MOFs. So I believe, which is cool about Pascaline, she's going to get to actually help build this next version. We only make 500 cases of it a year. It's, I forget the proof, but it's in the 80s as well. And it's just, I mean, the flavors change all the time, but it's a little bit more souped up yellow. So it's less.
And it's hard to get, right?
It's the one thing with Chartreuse is it's just limited. It's available. You can walk into many stores in France in particular, maybe Germany, and specialty stores, and they'll have it. But it is hard to get for us here in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's other versions like the 1605, which is 116 proof. And again, only 500 cases made. It's to kind of mimic the flavor of this. So it's a lot more wormwood driven, earthier tones. There's a guy named Dave Wondrich, a writer and historian. He said he called it Chartreuse with claws, which I thought was kind of cool. And there's a few other types.
That's one of the reasons we need Le Coucou to reopen, because they have some of those crazy ones down there, and you can just go get a glass.
I was just wondering if they were open, so they're still.
I don't think they have any space for outside, but I don't think so. But you just mentioned wormwood. This is a little bit of a tangent, but sometimes I think in people's heads the other green liqueur is absinthe. can you just talk about the difference between the two in very broad terms and mixology and flavors?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it's a completely different product itself. Yes, it's a distillate. Yes, it has the addition of sugar, and yes, it has the addition of herb. With absinthe, absinthe is absolutely driven by the wormwood, and the consumption style. That's the main point of it, where
Right.
you would have many different liqueurs like Genepi, which is just as Genepi, single herb
Mm-hmm.
in there. So the similarities, it's a liqueur, but they're totally different because green chartreuse has 130 herbs and the spices and the flowers. What is also different about chartreuse and this liqueur and many others, 60% of the herbs come from France.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a bit of alpine herb in there. You can just taste it. But then there's other things from around the world, juniper and
That's really, there's I first learned about the idea of molecular pairing from Francois Chartier, who worked with El Bulli, and he kind of has taught people, and I think it's a bigger thing now, that like there's certain molecule in like Syrah and in olives, and that's why they go together. And when you were saying that Chartreuse in a Manhattan or a Margarita you've got 130 little flavor notes that are going to bond with the different things and make other things shine. That's completely fascinating to me.
I think it's really interesting. And I'd ask you, a really great question. It's similar when you're pairing wine and food, correct? So
it is. I mean, there's with wine, you can either find a contrast or you find a similarity. Yeah. But sometimes you pair a textural thing too. So I think it's a little bit different with wine. But I think in Chartreuse, if you're looking for pine flavor, you can find it. If you're looking for fennel flavor, you can find it. If you're looking for citrus, you can find it. And that kind of makes it go with so many things.
I think so, for sure. And, I've seen certain pairings really just be interesting. So tequila or agave spirits being mineral driven, right? Mm-hmm. You're tasting the agave and the minerality of it. And then you mix it with green chartreuse. The vegetal of the green chartreuse jumps out even more. And cool. Mineral and vegetal, fantastic. Where then if you take a brown spirit with the tannins of the aging, you may want to have yellow chartreuse because that honey will go well with the tannins. Yeah. So that's how I thought.
It's a whole rabbit hole to go down, but a fun one to do. Can you explain to me there was a time when they were making it in Spain?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. This is the wild part. The history of chartreuse and what the monks have been through. Chartreuse is owned by the monks. The monks have been making it forever, and it's been a secret recipe. So let's just use that as the base. Yeah. And for years throughout history, you'd have the French government wanting the recipe. Well, in the 1800s, Napoleon's men, said, I want the recipe. We have to nationalize this recipe. Give us this recipe. No. Somehow Napoleon's men got the hold of the recipe but couldn't decipher it. And the story is, it's many years ago. Here you are, monks. You can have it back. We're not going, it's your recipe. Fast forward to 1903, where again, there was a discussion between the state, the country, and the monks. I want that recipe. Monks said no. And the government expelled the monks. So give it to us. So the monks said, no, we're going to take it. And they moved the production of chartreuse to their other monastery. There's about 22 around the world, to Tarragona, Spain, which is right outside of Barcelona. And they set up shop there, started making chartreuse in Tarragona, 1903. Finally, they slowly came back to France in the late 1920s. They set up shop to make chartreuse in Marseille at their monastery there. Mm-hmm. Still making their way back. And finally, the government said, fine, you can come back. And I think it was 1929 or 1930, I get some of my dates confused, but they were finally allowed back into France to make chartreuse back again in Valognes, which is where they were up until, till about a year ago when they opened a new distillery. But that Tarragona distillery in France stayed open until 1989, making Chartreuse for mostly the South American market. Now, the cool part, and what's cool about your question from a flavor perspective, is Tarragona. Remember, I said there's distilling and then there's aging. The aging in Varon in the Chartreuse mountain region is underground in cellars, like many aging areas. So it'll age differently. I was lucky enough to take a peek once at the old Tarragona cellars. They're on like sea level, and they were like above ground. So to me, I'm like, okay, so and it's Barcelona, or
it's warm.
It's hot,
right?
Right? So the whole flavor is going to be different. Better, worse, I don't know, but different. So I thought that was a really cool thing. So you will see, to people who don't even know what we're talking about, Tarragona, you'll see bottles out there that say Chartreuse Tarragona, and that just means it was made at that distillery.
Okay.
And they're rare.
Because I've been I was in Bordeaux, and somebody ran off from our trip to some liquor store and bought some old bottle, and I was like, "What are you doing? Spending $900 on a bottle?"
Is that what they did?
It was insane, yeah.
Right.
So F. Ferron asked, "How can we get a bottle of Elixir? What is? Oh, that's the little elixir that you were showing. You got to go to France, buddy. I think, right?
Or have a friend from France.
Where do you get it in France? At a liquor store or a pharmacy, or where do you get it in France?
They are sold in homeopathic stores, like you can find them in pharmacies. You can find them in the grocery stores. Certainly the closer you are, like everywhere, the closer you are to Chartreuse, the more available it is.
Gotcha.
They're not bad. They're like €20.
Oh, fabulous. Okay.
And Ferron, if you have any friends, once we start traveling again, these are great. They stick right in your backpack, really easy.
That is the good one.
And you don't even have to wrap it, because this is like this wooden piece is bubble wrap from the the 17th century, when the monks would go around on the back of their donkey and they'd just deliver it to place. So this was very ingenious bubble wrap. So good luck with that.
So Becky Sue Epstein's a friend of mine, and she's a journalist who just wrote a fascinating book on fortified wines. So this is her wheelhouse. She was asking, where and why did the monks move a year ago? You were touching on that.
Yeah. Hi, Becky. The monks moved their distillery. It's a simple kind of answer, but with layers, like everything with Chartreuse. They were in the town of Varon, which is about a 45-minute drive from the monastery, which is in the mountains. They were there since the 1930s, and then up until last year, they opened up Agnoir Distillery, which is a little closer to the monastery. The main reason was because of code. The distillery in Varon, when it was first built, there was no town around it, and a whole city was built around it. And now you've got a distillery with 110 proof booze aging in the middle of the city. So it was really, the fire code said you have to come up back, you have to change everything or move. And they made the decision, this is where it gets more thoughtful, to move to Agnoir, which is land that's originally owned by the monks.
Oh, okay.
Agnoir means black water, I believe it is.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Dead. No, it's
Black
water.
swamp, yeah. Black swamp, black water.
Anybody
on French here? Tell me what it is.
No, it's like water that stops moving. Like there's an egg mort on the ocean. It's like a delta that's like water that doesn't move. I think it's a body of water that doesn't move. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. So they made it closer for the monks, because the monks' main mission is to pray. It's not to make liqueur.
Yeah.
So as Chartreuse started selling more, the monks were much busier. So they limits their travel. It's on their own land, and it allows them to resource the water from the mountains. It's a little larger, where they'll start to grow their own honey. They'll have an apiary there. One of the missions for the monks, particularly now, is to sustain the world. In order to sustain their order for another 300 to 500 years, it's important that they're able to finance that order, and they finance the order through the liqueur. And the liqueur requires herbs, spices, and flowers. I'm a lot of, and this world is changing. So they wanted to be as sustainable as possible. That's just, yeah, which I think is really fascinating.
That's incredible. I love that they're changing the world. So drink Chartreuse and support these monks, people. This is just a statement, but I would like your reaction, because you're such a thoughtful guy. It's fascinating to me that this is an artisanal product, but also a global brand. And it's something that they make a fair amount of, but it's so carefully monitored and made. And I think it's kind of a dream for many, many companies to that tightrope that they've managed to walk.
That's a really good question, or a really good statement. Yeah, it's a challenge, because one of the many things that make this an interesting job and brand is we don't want to turn it into Jägermeister. I love Jäger for this purpose, but that's not the goal. You know, the monks one day may say, we're only going to make this much. You know, we're monks. We only need this much to make. So it is a balance that we have to it's a fine line we want to walk. And also one of the, the things I think people love about Chartreuse is the artisanalness of it. So there's the desire to be, the monks only want to make so much because they have another purpose, which is praying for us, praying to God, living, they pray 8 times a day, starting at midnight to 3 a.m. and then wake back up at 6. And that's their mission. So there's that. There's the marketing of it, which is we want to stay true to the small boutique uniqueness of it. Yeah. I think people love that. And the third is it's a process. You know what I mean? It's a process to make this. I mean, it's at least a month for green Chartreuse, just in the blending and the distilling, and then there's aging, and it's only so much room. So yeah, so it's a beautiful thing. One of the other things why we won't going back to the marketing of it is we need to protect that image of Chartreuse. We don't use the monks in any kind of imagery. We try and separate them. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of the business of Wildman, who's an extension of the company that manages the business called Chartreuse Diffusion. So
I think you're the perfect guy for it. I got to say, you're one of the best brand ambassadors that I work with, because you do, again, that fine line of being a good salesperson, but you're also supportive, and you're always there if I need something, but you also don't let me forget about you. And I think that's people who want your job should follow what you do. I think you're very good.
That's cool. Thank you.
Can you, just as we kind of wrap this up, did I miss anything? Is there things people should know that we didn't cover?
I mean, yeah, let's keep going. No, I don't think there is much else in this case, unless we're going to start a whole nother hour of
right. While I will say that you're very receptive. If people have questions, I think they can just DM you directly on here, or me either. I'll pass them along.
Yeah. Thank you. I do think a nice takeaway for anybody who is interested, who has a bottle of Chartreuse at home or is interested in getting one, I think it's, one, I always keep my green Chartreuse in the fridge.
Okay.
I love that. And if you haven't paired it with chocolate or made it in a hot chocolate, you're missing out, because it is. Yeah.
So there's about another week of that we have left with hot chocolate, but I love it on ice cream. I love it over strawberries. It's over honeydew melon, is all those things. Don't forget all those things.
You poured the VEP green, or I think over
the MOF. I think it was the MOF yellow that you brought me, because Anna Christina was the genius behind that. She's like, put on the strawberries. I'm like, oh my, wow. So,
I know, it was so good. I love that. I'm going to come back soon. Good.
All right. Well, I guess I'll let you go. Thank you so much. This was so informative, and I always love talking to you.
Thanks. It's great to see you. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
All right. Take care, man. Be well. Bye, guys.